Music before Beethoven. The historical evolution of musical styles in some ways resembles the historical evolution of living creatures. Just as there is an ongoing, gradual process of small changes in life forms, there is also an ongoing, gradual process of small changes within any given musical style. But occasionally, a burst of dramatic changes occurs, in biology, resulting in the appearance of a new species, and in music, resulting in a new overall style. Biologists refer to this combination of frequent gradual change with occasional sudden change as punctuated equilibrium. Music historians instead refer to stable style periods. Here is a timeline illustrating the 7 major style periods of European musical history. It's somewhat simplified. Each boundary between styles, shown here as a crisp line, would be represented more accurately as a gradation that takes several decades to transpire. But for our purposes, it will suffice to illustrate approximately when the major style shifts occurred. So, for example, there's an overall set of features and preferences associated with music of the Renaissance, and a contrasting overall set of features and preferences associated with music of the Baroque era. Within each style, there's enough change that we can distinguish among, say, music of the early Renaissance, the High Renaissance, and the Late Renaissance, but they all resemble each other much more closely than they resemble Baroque music. We'll return to music of the Renaissance and the Baroque era in Module 9, when we examine Beethoven's Missa Solemnis. Right now, let's start by examining the contrast between Baroque music of the early 18th century in order to understand the so-called classical style of the late 18th century, which prevailed when Beethoven began his career. The classical style grew out of the European intellectual movement known as the Enlightenment, and in many ways it represents a reaction against the preceding Baroque style. We're not going to delve deeply into Baroque music. For this course, it should be enough to note that the Baroque style period gets its name from the preference for highly embellished melodies, often assembled from irregular phrase lengths, which are presented in contrapuntal textures. That is, the active, ornate melody in a high register is opposed to a bass line that is also active. This opposition often generates complex harmonies. If this vocabulary doesn't mean anything to you yet, please view the musical terms videos in this module. For example, listen to the linked selection by Johann Sebastian Bach and see if you can hear these qualities in the music. The classical style reacted against what some people perceived as the excesses of Baroque music. The classical style features much simpler melodies, which are more symmetrical and balanced in their phrase structures. They are also presented in simpler, homophonic textures, supported by a simple bass line with simple harmonies, so as not to steal focus from the simple melody. For illustration, listen to the linked selection by Johann Stamitz. Full disclosure, the term classical is anachronistic. If you could step into a time machine and travel back to the 1780s, musicians such as Haydn or Mozart would not only be surprised if you were to compliment them on their classical music, they probably would have taken offense. "What do you mean, classical? The music I write is modern. Some of it is really cutting-edge stuff." Nonetheless, it's the term in common use today, so we'll stick with it.